the pool area. We checked that out earlier. Do that later. All right, so this is the front of the neighborhood. We're gonna walk through these. We'll see. You can see some palm fronds down. We're gonna walk through these gates here. All right, so here we are. We're just off of Old Metro Parkway. You can see palm fronds have already taken a beating. We would be lucky if we only saw palm frond damage. You can see a bunch of them right there. All across the entrance to this neighborhood is Forest Lake Townhomes. You can see the palm trees are just taking a beating right now. And I want to be able to show you guys the street, this intersection over here. The lights are still working, but it's only a matter of time until those likely go out. Let's see if I can get my photographer to zoom in on the street signs. You can see those are just swaying right now. And it's really powerful. And then this camera that's closest to us, it's already bent. The other ones haven't bent from what I can tell, but this one is pretty badly bent already. And here's another bad band, so I'm gonna hold on to my hat because I've already lost it a couple times today. Ah, that one hurt. Yeah, this is one of those dangerous bands. We're probably going to need to seek shelter. Caleb, look at this sign right here. The construction sign is just wobbling. Of course it stops once I mention it. You see those trees over here? I'm really interested to see what those trees do during Hurricane Irma to see the aftermath here, but it's getting pretty hairy out here for us, so we're going to send it back to you guys so we can get into some shelter.
Good idea. Okay, thank you very much, Kim. And, you know, she showed those traffic signals and those poles. A lot of them have all been replaced to withstand very strong winds from hurricanes. So they may fare better this time around than some of the previous, as well as some of the power poles. We've seen FPL and other major utilities replace a lot of the power poles. Those old wooden ones would break, snap. They've got those big concrete poles that are meant.
Charlie and Wilma, because they had to replace so many. A lot of them are concrete now.
That's right. So they may fare a little bit better than some of the other things in our area.
That will help. We have on the phone, I believe, Ada, who is downtown in Fort Myers riding this out in one of the high rises.
Her husband.
Oh, Warren.
Oh, Warren. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you for joining us.
Trying to reach,
How are you guys doing?
Losing
First
some
of all?
trees, but others are being pushed to their break point. Different parts of structures are being tested and weakened. So what will happen when this storm surge that Chad's talking about, when that comes back, and when these much more powerful winds, you heard him say, Anderson, he believes that the effective force of the winds that we're going to get in a few hours will be twice what we're getting now. That's the big concern.
Yeah, I want to go to Miami, where Peter Zaleski, who's a business owner, is there. Peter, I'm wondering, how are things for you in terms of what you and what have you been seeing in your area in Miami?
Well, Anderson, what I can tell you is right now in the streets, and I'm in downtown Miami. I'm probably about a good 1,000 feet, maybe 2,000 feet directly from Biscayne Bay. Biscayne Bay is about ready to breach some of the seawalls that are in and around here. On the actual street level, it's probably about 2 foot deep or so. It's well past the grill of a regular traditional automobile. And in terms of winds, it's probably 70 to 80s plus, and then you're getting bursts. You can see it in the windows when the windows start to get pushed in. And a lot of the trees are bending, and they have been bending for quite some time.
The location you're in, is it a new construction? Because, it's one of the things we've been talking about is in the wake of Andrew, building codes were really upgraded, particularly for any new construction in South Florida.
It is a brand new building. It was constructed in 2013, came online. The developer had the foresight to go forward and actually build it so it's almost as if you're starting on the second floor. So the first floor is where the parking garage is and where you enter the building for the most part for visitors is going to be on that second floor. So think of what you'll see in the Keys or think about what you'll see in certain parts which flood a lot. Effectively, that ground floor is basically just dedicated towards parking. And, and when the water recedes, then you can sort of clean up and go back to normal. So they did take those advantages or those steps, and they also they put in place some pretty strong stringent glass panes, and so far they seem to be holding up, but I'm not sure if it'll continue, but I have some confidence, and I'm here.
And in terms of supplies, I mean, you know, people have been told to have about 3 days worth. I assume you have stocked up.
Well, you know, unfortunately enough, I went vegetarian, so I have a lot of beans and rice laying around. So I tended to cook up some of that, throw some spice in there, and I'm not worried. The only thing I'm worried about is probably gaining weight.
Well, if that's your only concern, then you're in very good shape. Obviously, here in Tampa, which has not seen this level of storm in nearly 100 years, 1921 was a storm which really decimated this area. And obviously, back then the city was not anywhere close to the development that we have seen now. But there's real concern about the buildings, their ability to deal with the level of flooding that may occur here. Peter, I appreciate talking to you in Miami. Certainly wish you the best in the days ahead. Our coverage continues from points all across southern Florida, from the west coast to the east coast. We're going to take a short break, and we'll be right back.
All right, thank you. We'll check back. They have a great perspective, first of all, and to know that they're safe going through this. Let's go to Marco Island now. I think we have some new video here. Folks on the island starting to see tree branches coming down on the road. And again, Marco Island, this situation could change very, very much in the next couple to 3 hours.
Yeah.
We'll be watching that closely.
Absolutely. They're seeing hurricane wind gusts and very, very strong winds there. Of course, the island was under an evacuation order for quite a few days already. Most people have left, but this gives you some idea of what people, if you're out of the area, you're trying to get some news about your neighborhood. We are seeing some big trees broken off in this picture. So that is expected in this type of hurricane with the winds that we're seeing, that will have a lot of tree damage and maybe some power lines down. But if you look at the house is faring just fine in this picture. Of course, it's a limited view, but we just want to give people on Marco some idea of what's happening there. Let's go now to Fort Myers Beach, and this is video near the Diamond Head Beach Resort. And you can see the palm trees are always
you can see in neighborhood by neighborhood here. Looks like a lot of people shuttered up there. The winds are starting, but as she was saying, a lot of folks, and there are a lot of neighborhoods like this, there's not always a place a garage to bring a car inside, or to bring the trash inside. Hopefully.
These hurricane conditions, and what most people are worried about, including the governor, is the storm surge that will come with these 130-mile-an-hour winds.
And we should mention there is also the possibility for tornadoes, and even now there has already been a reported tornado on the Florida Peninsula, not confirmed yet, but the National Weather Service in Miami has issued tornado warnings for a wide swath of Monroe, Miami-Dade, and Broward counties. Those are some of the most populated counties in South Florida. Of course, we know that hundreds of thousands of people have heeded the evacuation warnings, which have been now expanded to include large swaths of the western coast of the Florida Peninsula, where this storm is now on track to hit. So we're looking at the possibility, according to forecasters, of a direct hit to St. Petersburg, perhaps Tampa, as opposed to Miami. So those areas have been evacuated, but already seeing damage to property property in South Florida. And of course, this is a deadly storm. Almost 24 people killed by this storm in the Caribbean. And what we're really talking about now is high winds. And as Vlad says, up to a 15-foot storm surge, although moderate in the several feet range. But these are very low-lying, close to sea level areas that we're talking about. And what storm surge means is basically massive, the potential for massive flooding. We have also heard from Governor Rick Scott that while this storm is making landfall, and when it finally does on the U.S. mainland, rescuers will not be able to go out while the storm is ongoing and while those winds of up to 130 miles per hour sustained are happening. It's just too dangerous. At this point, Elaine Quijano, who's in Homestead, Florida, on the southernmost point of the peninsula, has said, if you're there in South Florida, stay where you are because the winds there already gusting more than 100 miles per hour. If you're further north, up near Tampa, where our David Begnaud has been reporting, you still have time to drive further north to safety. And, you know, obviously that's a judgment call. But if you feel comfortable and safe, the governor has said, stay where you are if you're in South Florida.
Well, I mean, at this point, it's too late. The warnings have been going out all week long. And what's really been fascinating to see is reporters on social media, CBS News reporters, who show as they head into ghost town. But for the people that have decided to stay, it is going to be extremely dangerous. If there is a silver lining, it's what our chief weathercaster at WCBS, Lonnie Quinn, has said, which is that the fact is that this storm, unlike what we saw with Hurricane Harvey in Texas, is moving at a little bit quicker pace than that storm. That storm just lingered over the Texas area and dumped tons of rain, and that is what led to the flooding that we saw here. The storm is moving at a faster clip, although it has slowed down.
It's only at 8 miles per hour. Yesterday it was at 16 miles per hour. So it has slowed, which Lonnie did say concerns him because it could mean a lot of rainfall. And when you couple that with the storm surge again, at the very least, we're talking about massive property damage right now along some of the most prized properties in Florida. And at the worst, we're talking about loss of life and people that simply couldn't leave. You know, I spoke to somebody the other day whose 90-year-old grandmother is on oxygen, and she's in the Miami area. So thankfully, it doesn't look like Miami's going to take a direct hit. But there will be people that just don't have the option to leave. We spoke with somebody.
CNN Weather Center. And Allison, where's the storm now? Where's it headed?
All right, so it's officially made landfall over the Keys. It did so at 9:10 this morning. Now it's going back out over open water and very warm water, I should mention. So we don't expect this storm to really change much in the next couple of hours. Right now, still a Category 4 storm, 130 mile per hour winds. You can see some of those incredibly heavy rain bands, not just around Key West, but also the outer bands. Fort Pierce, Fort Lauderdale, even Fort Myers starting to pick up in some of those heavier bands of rain. Current winds, notice Key West. Nothing. That's because the station is broken. It stopped reporting after it likely took an incredibly high wind gust. Elsewhere, though, we're seeing 40, 45, 50, even 60 mile per hour wind gusts, and those are going to increase because the track is expected to take it up the west coast, heading towards Naples, Fort Myers, eventually into Tampa. Now, the one thing you will notice is we do expect it to eventually weaken by the time it gets to Tampa. So it's a slow weakening. However, once it gets to the Panhandle, it's going to encounter some shear, and that is going to rip that storm apart very quickly. So it goes from a 3 down to a 1, down to a tropical depression incredibly fast. The big story we've been talking to you about is the storm surge. Right now, the biggest storm surge is on the east coast side of Florida. All of that water is being pushed in from the strong winds. On the west coast side, it's entirely the opposite. The water is actually retreating. It's being pushed back out. You do not want to be on the beach when that water comes back. It comes back in fast and furious, and it can turn into a deadly situation incredibly fast. And it is going to come back. As that storm makes its way north, crossing over the main peninsula, that water will come back in, and that, Jake, is when we're going to start to see some of the biggest storm surges for the west coast region of Florida.
And what's going to happen? We have obviously a lot of individuals, including our own Kyung La, in Miami Beach right now. What's going to happen as the storm hits Florida to the areas of Miami and Miami Beach?
Right. So the current conditions that she is dealing with now are going to sustain that way for several hours before she finally starts to see conditions get a little bit better in Miami. And that's going to be for most people in Southeast Florida. It's going to remain bad for hours, and then it will finally begin to let up. Now, the rain bands will be off and on. You'll go from light showers to torrential downpours. But in terms of the winds, those are going to remain hurricane force gusts for quite some time. The West Coast side, you're going to start to see the conditions deteriorate rapidly over the coming hours, especially the folks in Tampa.
All right, Allison, thank you so much. And we're going to go back to CNN's Kyung La. She's in Miami Beach. And Kyung, we're told the conditions where you are going to get worse. Are you able to detect that just on the ground? Kyung La, I'm not sure if you can hear me. Let's go back to Allison Chinchar. So, Allison, in the Severe Weather Center, the storm it has made landfall, obviously, in Key West. It did so at 9:10 this morning, you said, and it's making itself up the west coast of Florida. There are a lot of individuals who fled southern Florida, 4 places upstate, that are now right in the eye of the storm.
Tampa being one of them. And unfortunately, what we've seen in the short term, the last couple of hours, is a shift in the track. Around Tampa, it's only a 14-mile difference. It no longer is expected to go right through downtown Tampa, but just about 14 miles west. And Jake, under normal circumstances, you would think that would be a good thing. Great. The main center is not going to go over downtown, but further west. The problem with that is it actually allows more of the storm surge to pile into Tampa Bay. So in theory, yes, your winds may not be as strong as that center of circulation pushes further to the west, but it increases your chances for the storm surge and potentially the height of said storm surge as well.
All right, we're going to go now to Key Largo, Florida, where we find CNN's Bill Weir. Bill, you're in the upper Keys. The hurricane made landfall on the lower Keys at 9:10 a.m. Describe for us the conditions you're experiencing.
It's really a dramatic shift as the wind starts to whip around now. Actually, the Irma came ashore at the exact spot we did the last evacuation live shot on, I guess, Friday night, as people were really starting to head north on US 1 after so many admonitions from first responders and the authorities now. We actually had to move our position to the under end of this carport. So now we're facing Biscayne Bay, and this is where the sloppy, dirty side of the storm, as you talk about, will start to pick up. As an extra menace, we have a sign here that says "Caution, crocodiles in the area," a reminder of the biodiversity in this part of Florida. You know, you could, I guess, make a joke about a crocnado, but if that is the case, it would not be a threat. It would be, obviously, wildlife is as much risk here as human life, but we're checking in with our contacts that we've made over the last couple days around. We're hearing from people on the other side, on the Atlantic side of Key Largo, who are riding it out. They're losing tiki huts. They're seeing sheets of plywood blow around. No major boat damage. If you remember back to Hurricane Andrew, the way those boats were stacked like cordwood, nobody has seen that yet at this particular, thank goodness. But the big concern is what these big 110 mile an hour winds will do to the infrastructure in this part of the Keys. The ocean railroad that they built back in the 30s was taken out by a hurricane. People worry that if one of those bridges goes, it will cut off the Keys from the mainland for the unforeseeable future. They do have a desalination plant. They do have a power generation station that can give them maybe 60% of their peak power to tide them over to get things back normal. But it is really been, I think this is my 8th hurricane. I'm hardly a seasoned meteorology. We did Katrina together. Did Ike and Gustav. This is the most violent I've ever seen, Jake.
Stay safe, Bill.
We will.
Joining us on the phone is Senator Marco Rubio. He's a Republican of Florida. Senator Rubio? Joining us on the phone right now from his home in Miami is Senator Marco Rubio, Republican of Florida. Senator, thanks so much for joining us. Hurricane Irma's destructive eye wall hit the Florida Keys just this morning. Do you have any sense of how bad it is down there in the Keys?
Well, I don't think anyone does at this point because obviously there's not a lot of people there. Thankfully, they left. The ones
hasn't
that
been a
are,
lot of rain in this particular area. And the interesting thing is power has continued to be on. Looking out from my hotel room, you can to the north of here in the city area, you can see that there are lights on. And I was a little worried this morning when I got in the elevator. I went, oh, why didn't I book on the second floor? So I'm on the 8th floor. And what happens if electricity goes out when I'm going down? Oh. So, those are the things you kind of think about after the fact. So basically, what we'll try and do is get over towards where we were yesterday. I doubt if they're going to let us get onto the barrier island to check and see what the situation is out there. But if we can, we will. Our plan is to drive around a bit and continue to feed you what we call these look lives, which are on video, and then we'll get our live component going here a little bit later in the day. Just a quick word. Key West used to cover down there a lot. Heart goes out to those people. And, it's funny, when you get into these situations, you tend to sometimes focus on one thing. In Ernest Hemingway's house in Key West, on the second floor, I know exactly where it is a plate that was done by Pablo Picasso. They were friends. And that plate is absolutely spectacular. And I've just been fixating on, I hope it's okay. It's those little things like that that you think about when, even though there's a big picture going on, so Godspeed to those folks. Hopefully not too many people stay. Anyway,
try to head back. This is a time for them to have confidence, hopefully, in where they are and just stay in place and ride it out. But, it was one of those storms where it wasn't easy to just move your family. There really wasn't anywhere in Florida that I could point to and say, if you go there, you're not going to see the storm. It's going to cover all of Florida. I know people that went to Georgia that are now figuring out how to get out of Georgia because it's headed in that direction.
Where are your wife and children?
They're here. I think the kids are still up there sleeping. When you put shutters on your home, it's darker than ever, so it's a pretty good sleep, actually. It gets dark inside a house, so hopefully they'll... but we're going to be in this, so tomorrow morning. I mean, that's the threat in South Florida, but it's just beginning for the rest of the state. But they're here, thankfully, and everyone's safe.
Senator Rubio, we're praying for you, your family, and all the citizens of Florida this morning. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Stay with us. I'll be back in 2 hours, but CNN's breaking news coverage of Hurricane Irma continues right now.
This is CNN Breaking News.
If you are just joining our continuing coverage of Hurricane Irma, the hurricane has made landfall in the Florida Keys as a Category 4 storm. You will see on your screen what that means in terms of wind speed. The big concern, of course, is storm surge. The most deadly aspect of a hurricane is drowning. The water is the major concern. More than 600,000 people out of power already, and we have seen the least of the worst, and that's just in central and southern Florida. As this storm moves, the tally will only grow. But we are now at the beginning of the process. The Keys getting hammered, gusts well in excess of hurricane levels. I am in Naples, Florida, the west coast of particular concern, vulnerabilities to storm surge, very low-lying areas, Tampa Bay especially. So far, we've been seeing gusts in excess of 60 miles an hour or so and rain for hours. One of the problems with this hurricane is its size. It's the size of a state. So while we all focus on the eye of the storm, you'll see hurricane force winds 70, 75 miles out from that eye. You'll see tropical storm force winds, which are still super destructive, 100 plus miles out. So the reach is great. That's why we're seeing that even though the east coast of Florida was spared, in quotes, that's a defined term because they have been getting hammered by really bad winds and water. John Berman is in Miami. He has been standing through it all night, now all morning. What's the situation there?
We've been having these tropical storm force winds now for hours and hours, Chris. And the National Weather Service said they're experiencing gusts of 100 miles an hour in the high-rise buildings of downtown Miami, telling people to stay away from the windows with those gusts of 100 miles an hour. That's well over hurricane force in the downtown area. And, of course, there are those cranes that everyone's concerned about in the city as well, more than 20 of them. Now, Miami-Dade County is a county of 2.5 million people. The emergency management just put out a notice saying they will not respond to 911 calls anymore. There are no rescues happening right now because the winds are so strong. And remember, that's in a county of 2.5 million people. So many affected by that right now. So many people here who need to hunker down. The wind, just one of the concerns. Storm surge, that may be the story of this entire storm all across the Florida Peninsula. Here in Miami, they're expecting a surge of 3 to 6 feet. I think we're starting to see it right now, Chris. These docks behind me, you were out here yesterday. The water does lap up over them at high tide. We're 2 hours from high tide right now, and they are completely submerged. If the water were to come up another 4 feet or so, it would be over where we're standing right now, and that would be a serious concern. We would then move. That's what people are watching. That's why there were the evacuations here in the downtown Miami area. Of course, out there in Miami Beach, it's even worse. So that's the situation here in Miami. Let's go over, I believe, to Tampa and CNN's Anderson Cooper. Anderson.
Yeah, John, obviously a very different situation, but a taste of what you've been seeing in Miami, and particularly Miami Beach, that Kyung La has been reporting on all morning. That's a taste of what is to come here and more. Tampa, which thought a couple of days ago that they were not going to be getting hit as hard as Miami Beach, woke up to a very different reality yesterday morning when that storm moved west. Late last night, as you know by now, the storm even moved a little farther west, which may sound like good news for Tampa because originally it was going to come right up, barreling straight toward Tampa, now a few miles out to the west. It's actually worse news because it means that Tampa is in that northeast quadrant of the storm, and that storm surge very likely to enter into Tampa Bay and up through the inlets here throughout Tampa. One of the things that makes Tampa such a beautiful city. This is the Hillsborough River, where we are. Later today, we are expecting to see. Right now, as the winds are moving counterclockwise, those tropical storm winds, those hurricane storm winds moving counterclockwise, the water's actually going out. Later today, that water's going to be coming back in. Let's check in with Chad Myers in the Weather Center. Chad, just explain where this storm is right now and what folks here on the West Coast are going to be expecting in the hours ahead.
Absolutely. The storm has now moved over the lower Keys. It's now back into Florida Bay. Florida Bay is a warm body of water. There's a lot of lobsters in there, freshwater, warm water lobsters. And as the storm moved to the north of there, you think, oh, wow, great, it's going to hit the land here. Well, this is the Everglades. It's not really land. Miami, you are not going to be in the clear until the center gets here, your closest approach. So you still have more hours of worsening weather to go, even though you think you're done. You're not. Fort Pierce and these bands coming on shore here as well. This storm really did punch through Cudjoe Key, Summerland Key, and Big Pine Key. This is where it is now, just exiting there. You're getting the backside of the eye. Let me take you to what this looks like right on the ground. Here is Key West. Key West, at least 120 miles per hour here as the storm wrapped around. Back up the Keys here. There's only one road in and one road out, making landfall at Cudjoe Key. Lots of little residences here. Also very big damage through Ramrod, Little Torch, and also Big Pine Key. We also have all of these little key deer that run around through here. To the next spot, a 7-mile bridge. And this is what they're worried about. Maybe not so much the bridge, but the infrastructure on the bridge. Water is ripping under this area right through now. And then one more spot to the north of here up into Marathon. Marathon catching the water here, running right through Jewfish Creek and out. I can't imagine how fast the water is running right through here. That could also cause damage to the infrastructure of the bridge because we could be washing things away, washing the bottom of the bridge away, those little stanchions that hold the bridge up. And then all of a sudden, the Keys are cut off. The rain goes all the way to Jacksonville. The rain is all the way up the East Coast, and so is the surge. We talk about this surge. It's going to surge on this side, maybe 2 to 4 feet, but the bigger surge will be to the west, right where you are Bar, in Fort Myers, in Naples, in Cape Coral. Those are the areas that you need to be above ground, above sea level by more than 10 to 15 feet, because that's where that surge is. And then eventually on up toward Birmingham, but that's irrelevant at this point in time. The surge goes this way. Naples, what you're going to experience in the next few hours, if you're not doing it right now, the water's going to go out. You're going to push away. You're going to be 3 feet down. You're going to have a negative surge. And you're going to think, oh, there goes the storm. It's over. Absolutely not. Your surge is on the backside of this, kind of because of the way it's hitting the west side, not the east side. The surge is on the wrong side of the eye. It's on the backside, and it is going to be tremendous, 10 to 15 feet. So be ready for that. Anderson.
Chad, a lot to look for in the hours ahead. It is going to be a very difficult day for an awful lot of people, for millions of people all across Florida. We're going to continue to follow this very closely. Brian Todd is in West Palm Beach. Brian, what's the situation there?
Anderson, a real intensification of the conditions here just over the past hour. The wind has really intensified here to almost hurricane strength. And what is adding to the danger here is we have been under tornado warnings just about all day. We're under one right now. And we're told by our CNN weather team that pop-up tornadoes are going to be a threat all day long. We've got to hang on to these railings just to walk around here. We just got pelted with another burst right now. You can see these palm trees here under strain. We'll try to walk along this railing, but we've all got